Alright, today I wanted to do a little video. Um, I'm going to try to get Tailwind CSS working with Rails 6. And I found a couple blog posts that are also installing some other stuff. This one's pretty basic. It's talking about upgrading from 5.2.3 to 6. And I have an app that I want to do that with. Kind of right now trying out the process, just starting off with Rails 6 to see what's needed to get Tailwind in there. So it's saying to check the Rails version, so we can do that here. And we have 5.2.4.1. Okay, so we actually want to do, let's check the Ruby version too, 2.6.1. So let's do gem install Rails. And also, I'm going to open another terminal here and run an RVM list. See what I got on. Okay, that's the only version of Ruby I've got currently. Alright, so got Rails 6. Let's make a new app. And we'll have this be Tailwind setup. And then we'll use the code command to open this up in another VS Code window. We should have Webpacker hooked up by default with Rails 6 now. So after Nopagiri finishes, Nopagiri is always the slow guy because I'm still compiling with the native extensions here. But was also checking that we've got Yarn installed, and if you saw before at the top of the terminal we do Yarn installed. And then we're going to do this after we're done. We'll add Tailwind CSS. And we can check out the Tailwind docs and kind of try some stuff out too. Now, I was previously using a library called Tachyons. I really like it for building layouts, and really I feel like the style of coding when you're doing CSS is really I got used to it. I like it a lot. There's a couple things about it that I wish were different, and one of them is the kind of the scaling of spacing. So if we look through and find, let's find, we may have to go to the docs to see this actually. If we go to docs and then say go to layout spacing, the way they've got it set up is it's like exponential. Like the leap between like padding 2 and padding 3 is pretty big, and I found a lot of times I really wanted something in between 2 or 3 or 4. You know, like this is, especially as the number gets bigger, it's kind of huge. So rather than it being like the numbers are kind of a linear representation of the difference, it's they're doubling each time. So like 1 is twice as big as 0. Well, that doesn't apply, sorry. But 2 is twice as big as 1. 3 is twice as big as 2. 4 is, you get the idea. And Tailwind has a similar idea where you have classes that apply degrees of padding, but the scale is linear. And like instead of this being 7, you'd go up to like what would that be, like 64, something like that. So like this would be 1, this would be 4, that would be 8, this would be 16, 32, 64, that would be like 128, something like that. So that they're, and the main thing is the smaller amounts of padding, you have more options. Whereas in tachyons, like, there's no middle ground between 2, 3, and 4, and just looking at it, you can kind of tell there are a lot of cases where those are not going to really be enough. They'll work, but they're not as fine-grained as maybe you'd like. Yeah, I'd never installed Rails 6 in the system before, so it's going to take a while, so I can keep kind of talking about the differences between tachyons and Tailwind here. And also like in a both of them kind of have a similar aesthetic when compared to things like Bootstrap, because while Bootstrap will give you a bunch of examples, and then you put in some markup with a couple classes, and it'll actually do a bunch of CSS for you. Both of these libraries work in such a way that each class that you add to an element only adds basically a single declaration. So it's only applying like a single style rule, and the name of the class itself usually has an explicit reference to it, like what is the rule that's being applied and like how much of it's being applied. So it makes it really easy to look at the markup and see what styles are being applied to a particular HTML tag without having to go to another file and then find where that class is defined. It's all right there. And also one of the nice side effects of that is that when you're editing something, you're only editing the thing you're looking at the moment, because you're not changing classes on other elements, you're just changing it on the one you want to change. So it's kind of like inline styles in that way, except that's what it feels like, except you are keeping things dry because you are applying this pattern, right, this particular style rule to all of the elements that it applies to. And I think one of the problems with an older way of doing CSS, where you define a class for every new element and then you add a bunch of styles rules to it, is you end up with repetition there, and you end up with classes that really are doing a bunch of things and therefore stop being reusable, right? The chances that you end up with then interfering style rules and then needing to be more specific, which takes the browser longer to work with. And just workflow-wise, it's really nice to be able to focus on one thing at a time and know that you're not messing with something that you don't want to be. Okay, so Webpacker is installed. Nice, and then we've got a bunch of stuff in here. I'm going to open up Tailwind setup in another VS Code window here. We can close this other one. And then we can we'll make an initial commit here. I spelled initial right, yes. That's 50-50 for me, I'd say. Okay, so we have a node modules folder, we got a bunch of stuff, and I think going back to this blog post, not really much to it, but we have this yarn add Tailwind CSS. And that's going to add it to our package JSON and also the yarn lock. And then yarn list should include it. So if we do yarn list, and then look for T's. Sorry, we got some stuff going downstairs. Tailwind, where are you? Table, really close. Tailwind CSS, there it is. Cool. Okay, and then in our application CSS, or actually this is in JavaScript CSS. Okay, so because our app is now being managed, or our CSS is now being managed through the JavaScript. So let's make sure we got this app JavaScript CSS. So let's create a folder called CSS, and then a file called application.css. And then in here, interesting. Okay, so they're basically setting this up so that this is a SAS file. You put this code in it, and then you load it. You load the file from the packs. Interesting that this is a require. When was this? Is December last year? I might look at another blog post too and see how they do it differently. So these are imports, and then in packs application.js, where we've got a couple requires already. Can add this guy. And adding to a file post CSS config.js. Okay, that was generated. Alright, so we got this stuff. And then we want to add Tailwind CSS and auto prefixer. Okay. And then if we go to our application layout, probably this stuff is already going to be there. Let's check though. App, let's collapse everything. App, views, layouts, application. Okay, that does look quite like what we already have. Let's just double check. One way to tell. Okay, so that actually, it seems like their top line says style sheets. But I don't think that makes sense. I think it'll be fine to leave it as is. Because we're loading the pack tag application, and that is the one that actually does the require for the CSS file. So I don't think we need that style sheet tag. I think that one is already fine. Or we don't need to change it. Okay, so then Webpack. I don't know that we need to do that either. See what it does. Alright, I'm going to open another terminal. Okay, so it just built the app, I think. JS application map. Okay, so is this going to be in temp? Where does that go? Public? X.js. Okay. Yeah, so it went in here. Alright. And then I guess like the other alternative to this, I think, would be running the dev server. And this one isn't really going to do much right now, I don't think, but this would be, like, if we were changing configurations, I think this would help with live reloading the changes, so that the JavaScript will get recompiled when we save something in the packs directory. Okay, so if we go over here, start up a Rails server, and then come to localhost 3000. Let's go back. Sure, we're loaded now. Okay, we're on Rails. All right. So this this guy. Let's see if we just copy this into when we can. There's this post is saying to put this in application layout. We can also, if we don't want to do that, we can actually generate a welcome controller that has a home action. And actually, real quick, I'm going to undo that and commit this stuff. You know what? I'm not going to do that yet. I will commit it in pieces, but I want to make sure that this actually is working correctly first before we commit those pieces, the configure Tailwind. So to see that, let's go to our welcome. We have a route for this, and let's make it the home. Let's make it the root route. Welcome home. Okay, so then we have a home view, and then this is where I want to put that code they had there. And card top, that's not a thing here, so if we want an image, let's do unsplash and then sunset. I like it. Okay. Okay, let's do medium. Copy link address. Okay, that's a download link. Copy image address. Let's try this guy. Okay, that's pretty. There's a lot there, but let's try this. Okay. There's a menu option to collapse. Let's close all these guys. Alright, home. And then the source of this image is going to be that long guy instead. And then if we save that and come back to our Rails server and refresh. Cool. Yeah, that looks like one of the cards from the Tailwind docs. So that's good. Alright, so if we want to start doing some more configuration, let's see what options we have. So Webpack, we have a plugin, we have Tailwind CSS. Okay, this looks like what that blog post was telling us to do. And then in our Webpack config, we can tell it to use a couple of other things. But first, let's do add Tailwind and basic configuration. Okay. now it was looking at our Webpack config. It seems like this might be a little bit different in Rails. Let's see, like Rails Webpack config, Webpacker. I know there's like a webpacker.yaml file. Oop. Let's see if there's any. Okay, Rails Webpacker Tailwind CSS. Let's see if we get any hits here. I think, yeah, this is the other post I was looking at. They have, actually, let's add these links to the README for this repo. Probably gonna post it later. Resources. Right. And then this other resource, this was a basic install. Okay. And then we can make these list items so that they're not right next to each other too. And VS Code has a nice little preview feature, which we can use if I remember. There we go. Okay, cool. Looks good. Save that. And if we come back over, thinking. So this one is having you make a new app, add Tailwind, add a CSS directory in JavaScript folder, and then do this. We didn't do this. Let's see. Let's try that. Okay, and then this. So this is adding a Tailwind.js file to. Okay, that looks kind of similar. Does it? That looks similar a little bit to what they had down here, or not? Strike that. It does not. Does it look something like what was over here? Slightly. Obviously, it's a little different. Well, no. Okay. Is this? This could be. I think that's kind of what this is. So this is kind of. It stands in for the. CSS. Okay. Now I'm a little bit unsure about that. Let's keep reading. So it's also saying to add that file. Okay, and it is so, or interesting. So it also added this file inside of the CSS directory. And we had those imports, same. And this was there, and it's. Though, okay, so this is, I think this is a better way of doing that though, rather than doing the require. I know we've got all of these requires in here already. Just, it feels to me like if we're using Webpack, we should be using imports. And let's see if this is changing. Okay, so that doesn't like that. Interesting. Okay, so if we undo that, go back to what it was before, see if this compiles this time. Okay, so the requirement, I don't know, interesting. So it seems like this, for whatever reason, that this tutorial, that's not going to work with this setup. Post CSS. Okay, we did these things. That looks a little different though. Let's double check. Okay, so we had require Tailwind CSS, and then parentheses right after it. Yeah, it's quite different. Maybe, let's see what happens if we add this. See if this still compiles. Okay. Okay, nice. I think this might be, all right. Okay, that looks like the full file. This looks similar. Okay, and then they're using a card. Okay. All right, nice. Okay, I think this is good, adding this piece, because that's going to allow the configurations that we put into this Tailwind.js file here. Like if we extend the theme, then we're going to be able to, like that's actually Webpack, the dev server, like Webpacker is going to be able to see those things and actually make changes. So that's going to help us if we want to make modifications to the theme. And that's something I haven't done super much yet. I think I've seen a couple of examples for what you do, how you can do that. These are just installation docs, but let's see. Yeah, customization, because this is, I feel like, yeah, okay. There you go. So you can set your breakpoints, huge, the border width, you have options, and you're basically setting what 0, 2, and 4 are, I guess, there. And then you get the ability to extend colors. So what do they give you? So they say theme extend, but all these other things would go into extend. Oh, no, so these would be separate. Theme screens would be a separate key, and then extend would have colors and spacing if you wanted to add additional options here for how far elements will be spaced out from one another. For example, in the spacing. Ooh, what did I just click on? Oh, so now I'm looking at customizing spacing. Okay, so you can actually override the default spacing. Okay, yeah, this is where it gets cute. And honestly, I think tachyons probably can do this too, so I'm not really doing a fair comparison, because I was always using the CDN link version of it. But Tailwind does seem like it's got a bigger community behind it, and definitely there are more resources online for how to get set up. But this is great, because this is the same spacing scale that's going to be used by padding, margin, width, and height. So it'll be really easy to stay consistent with the box model and making sure that things are consistent within the layout. I wonder if there's, okay, so then there's a link here to the default spacing scale, which we can see is, yeah. So right, so now basically, okay, px is for 1 pixel, nice, and then 1 is 4 pixels, 2 is 8, 3 is 12, so we have a linear scale. There's a lot more variation here. It does start, they kind of start skipping numbers once you get up to 6. So it starts becoming a little bit, starts ramping up a little more dramatically when the numbers get bigger. But really, if we look at this, that's not actually the case. Like 6 to 8, these are both just the number here multiplied by 4. So you can get a really much better intuitive sense of like the relative widths or spacing of multiple elements just by comparing the numbers, because this is a linear scale all the way up to 64. 64 times 4 is 256. So I think if we're looking at the options, just one back, it was saying the like spacing, this was adding a couple bigger ones, 96 and 128, which if we look at this just stops at 64. So it was kind of letting you have a couple of more options, which I'm pretty sure is also going to scale to adding, like these are valid numbers that you can put in the slot where a number would go for any of those, like padding, width, margin, or what was the other one? Was it height? Yeah, padding, margin, width, and height. So this actually allows you to generate either like, and I believe this this won't override the existing ones if you don't mention them, right? So when we just had like 96 and 128 here, that's not going to change anything. You know, any of the ones that start from 1 all the way up to 64, those will all still be available. So this gives you the benefit of still having the ability to have markup that, you know, in this case, X is horizontal, Y is vertical. So we have like a horizontal padding of like a 6 degree, and then a vertical padding of 4. And then like left and right would just be PL, PR. But this gives you, you know, you can really look at the markup and get a really good sense of what's being applied to what. It's just, after working with it for a while, especially if you're using some kind of front-end framework like React or Vue or Angular, being able to just have the markup like explicitly say what styles are going to be applied, and then if you do have things that really feel like, okay, this is always going to be the same, like this is a card, right? You can make a presentational component that just has the styles for your card, and then just import that card component wherever you need it. And then if you want to ever make changes to that card, you literally change the HTML and CSS together. So you're not having to context switch between the HTML and CSS and wonder about where else you're using that class. It's just the mental overhead. It's a lot easier to manage. So this seems like a pretty good configuration now. We've got this guy, which we can expand as we kind of look at more things here. And I think this was the default. Where was the one that gave us the overriding config? Yeah, here we go. So you can add font families for your width, but I think these are going to be useful. So let's see what happens if we add these in here. It should, the one we had already loaded up the card should behave the same way. And there's no way to make this like Well, actually, let's see if we add like a left padding to the entire container. So let's say in home we do padding left 64, and then refresh this guy. Ooh, okay. Padding maybe. No, we want. How about margin? Okay, and then just for reference now, if we go to 96, so 64 still works, we know. Now 96 works as well, and that's obviously a better way of handling that, but nice, it's got so this width full is going to make that image responsive. We want to have a room too. Cool. And then if we want to like restrict how small it could get, we could do that as well. One thing that's also really sweet about this is the responsiveness. So I think I'm also going to pull these in because it's something that I found. And oh, looking at this, right, you could potentially add breakpoints, which would be huge. Like if you find your design, you know, somewhere between those pixel settings, like it's not quite clicking, you could add another breakpoint. Maybe not, maybe better to not, but you could. So let's see if we took these guys and then went over to the config again, and inside, this is inside of theme. So if we go inside of theme and then we add screens, now we have the ability, if we feel like our design isn't quite working with these exact pixel breakpoints, we can adjust them, and we can change when the styles that are prefixed with one of these screen sizes will be applied, which is awesome. Okay, so as kind of an example of the way we might want to do this, let's say when we just think about this. So we got this card. Well, one thing we might do, like if we wanted to control as we get smaller, we might want to say like, you know, right now this is fine how far it is from the center, but when we get here, maybe we want this distance here on the left to be smaller. So let's see how we can apply these the breakpoints. So let's look at in the docs here. If we look at layout, see if we can find anything that has, obviously grid will be really helpful for this, but I just want to demonstrate the those responsive classes, responsive design. Okay, so every utility class in Tailwind can be applied conditionally at different breakpoints, which makes it a piece of cake to create or build complex responsive interfaces without ever leaving your HTML. So yeah, the way you do it is the name of the screen size, the breakpoint, and a colon, and then the style you want to apply. So this one is with 16 by default, and then it'll be with 32 on medium screens and with 48 on large screens. So the way these are set up, right, they're media queries. The smallest one is min width, so if we don't have a prefix, then it should apply across the board. If we have a prefix, it will apply if the viewport width is larger than that pixel point. Right. So if the width is greater than the small width, that will apply. If it's also greater than the medium width, then those styles will apply because they're defined afterwards. If it's also greater than large, then the large style will apply. And finally, if it's also greater than extra large, that one will apply. So if we want, say, our big, huge width to only be on large screens, we could prefix it with XL. So in home, if we put XL : here, now we save this and refresh. Now on the big screen we still have it like this, but then if we make it smaller, it's going to go here, right? So maybe XL, maybe large would be a better breakpoint. So let's try making this just large. And then if we save this, come back over here, now it waits till there, right? And at this point, maybe we can make it a little bit smaller. So it's 96 right now. Maybe we could make it, and I think, let's double check, but I think they put it in order from small to large. So let's say that on medium, we want the margin left to be 64, say. Okay, and then if we try that, refresh right here, and it shifts at this breakpoint, and then it shifts again at this is medium to small. Yeah, you get the idea. So we could also do small, and then gradually getting a little smaller here. And then we get, well, what we could do if we did the M16 or ML16. Now this is where it comes at smaller points, and then it's, we just added breakpoints to it. And if we had a layout, we would be using grid anyway, but this is just any of the declarations can be prefixed with these breakpoints, so you get a super fine-grained control over over a huge part of your design. And you're doing this in a very super targeted way. So when you're making these changes, you know you're not going to affect anything other than what you're working on at the moment, which is super nice. And you get you can use grid with a bunch of these, right? If we added just to demonstrate this, if we had like a loop, is that gonna work? Yeah, okay, so now they're stacked. In this case, these styles are not helping us in the same way. So now we got them all currently stacked. If we wanted to make this into a grid, we got our layout stuff. We have Flexbox if we want to use it. We also have grid. So if we check out the different options here, we have the ability to make up a responsive grid, including breakpoints. So we can depending on how big the screen is, we can have a huge variety of grids here. So the container class just gets a grid, or the container element gets a grid class, and then we add something like this. Let's just try this. right out of the docs. Save it, come over, refresh. Okay, so we broke it. Oh, okay, because what we didn't do is we didn't apply this to a parent. We actually just applied this to each card individually. So if we cut that out, and let's just tab this over, and then let's add a section tag, and then here we'll add those classes. And then below the loop, then we'll close the section tag. Now look at that. Crazy, except they're like all right on top of each other. So it's also, let's make more. Let's make it 30. Okay, so we get more to scroll through now. Actually, make it clean. Let's make it 32 so that we get a number that's gonna. What's the lowest common multiple? Actually, 6, 4, 3, 2, 24 would be better because 24 is divisible by all of these. Okay, so now we've got, yeah. And then if we get a little bigger, we should go to 6. There you go. We don't want them right on top of each other though. So let's look at the other options we have here. Okay, disabling. We have grid, columns, and we also have a gap option. Okay, so gap, and then again these numbers are scaled the same way. And we have row gap and column gap if we want those to be different. But just these are little examples, show you kind of the gutter size. So I think this is also something you could adjust with the size of the screen. Let's just experiment with like gap 2 for the whole thing and see how that looks. Okay. And then if you get smaller, it's on the big screen, I feel like that's not too big of an issue, although this is all of this is like super up against the edge of the screen here, so the whole section tag, it might be nice to add like margin, horizontal margin to it. And let's say margin horizontal of 2 is a tiny amount, but let's see, it's better. Cool. And then just as a experiment, there we go. So then at the bottom though, like everything works great until this happens, and then it feels like the this should be filling the whole container at that point. So let's think about how we might solve for that when we get there. So is it, let's see what's setting the width of this. If we go inspect, so we have width full, max width SM, overflow hidden. Okay, so the image itself doesn't have, as width full class gives width 100%. So it could just be that this image maybe is a smaller version of the image, possibly. Let's take a look. Doesn't look like it. That looks like an image that definitely could take up more space. Right. So if we look at it, it says 750 by 500 pixels, and the screen is definitely, like, it's scaling that down almost by half. So it is doing that for some reason. Something is up with the box model here. So if we click on this, we have horizontal margin. We got a gap. But if we look at the content of each box, the image is just not expanding. Okay. Let's see if we got any insight in the docs about images. Locking images to a fixed aspect ratio. Object cover. Well, that's for the shot. So we have an image, class full. Let's see if we add object cover to it. Doesn't seem to have made a difference here. Okay, the whole container that it's in, there's definitely room. Let's see, computed. Let's look for width. Width is, okay. It's grayed out. Okay, so the div itself, max, what does this do? Max width SM, let's try to find that declaration. Max width 24 rem. There we go. Okay. So what we want to do then is to have that only apply small. Let's see, how does this affect it when the screen gets bigger? It doesn't seem like it does really affect it that much. So let's look for the docs in this. Max SM, max width SM. Okay. Alright, so these are RAM related to. So it seems like, yeah, this is actually really useful. Okay, so you can change the max width of an element per breakpoint. And I mean, if we think about what this is being used for in the context of a grid, we wouldn't need it. I think if we were having just one card there and then we had some text next to it or something, then maybe we would want to be applying this class. But it seems to me like we can just lose it and we would get what we want in this scenario. That's really cool. I'm gonna scoot that back over. And let's see. So if we go now we're, look at that. And so it's really, now we're jammed up against the top too. So let's see if we just remove the X. I think maybe we have to do these separately. Let's see. Yeah. And I mean, maybe this could be even twice as big vertically. Okay, why are we not seeing a difference there? Let me double check it's actually loading in the browser. Okay, yeah. Interesting, but I feel like that's not actually affecting the positioning of the elements inside of the oh. No, that should be doing something. It should move it. That feels weird that it's... Oh, I needed to scroll. Wow, okay. Strange. Okay, so yeah. Alright, so it's a little, I think 8. Maybe 6. Okay. And then when you get wider, at this width, like this is still, it's quite tight. The kind of gap there too between the edges. So this we could also scale up. We could say like that, you know, on smaller screens it's a little more, there's a little more breathing room on the bigger screens on the sides. And it is still really tight, but you get the idea, right? You have a lot of control for all of this stuff about exactly how you want it to look at any given point. And you get really fine-grained access to the individual elements you're working with. So yeah, this is just, you know, something you can use to get started. See how a library like Tailwind might help you out with your CSS and Rails. Thanks for watching.